question is from JP94. Can you guys talk about lifts that help improve the bench, squat, and deadlift?
Oh, good question. So other lifts that help the bench, squat, and deadlift. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is obviously the best lifts to improve your bench, squat, and deadlift are going to be the bench, squat, and deadlift.
Right.
There's the rule of specificity. Most of the adaptations in strength and performance that you get can be directly applied to the thing that you're doing. So you get really, really good at riding a bike. You'll gain stamina for other things, but most of the
I believe it's actually the law of specificity.
Is it the law of specificity? Yeah. So this happens with fitness. So I'll say this before we get into other exercises. One of the best things I've ever done to get those specific lifts better, besides doing more of those lifts, is using progressive resistance tools like chains and bands. Game changers. I mean, I added, 20 or 30 pounds on each of those lifts when I finally figured out how to incorporate bands.
Now, can we talk a little bit about where you think the minimum dose of those exercises should be in a week if you're trying to improve them before you start? Because this is what I see.
I hear what you're saying.
So I hear questions like this a lot. And then, let's say we say, doing, dumbbell presses is also going to help your bench press. And then if I were to look at somebody's programming, because they heard that, dumbbell presses are going to help that. You've got bench one day a week, you've got dumbbell press another day, and then you got like flies. And it's like, if you want to get better at your bench, you want to be benching more than one time a week.
For sure. I would say
100%.
Yeah,
right?
I would say 2 days a week minimum, as much as 3 or 4 days a week. In my experience training people.
So that's the point I want to make is that even though we're going to talk about other things that can complement these things, it's just like, it's no different than the way we would talk to an athlete who says, I want to get better at soccer or I want to get better at football. What exercises should I do? And then if we go, you should squat, you should do this, you should do that. And then they stop playing soccer as much to do all those exercises. You'll actually go the other direction. Nothing's going to make them better at soccer than playing more soccer. Yeah. So
that's why I think the direction you're going would be my initial thought in terms of like segmenting or like taking apart, like some of those lifts. Like if I'm going to take, where's the biggest sticking point for me? Is it, at the bottom of the lift? Is it, is it where, say if I'm bench pressing and I can't get that initial press off once I bring it all the way down, like that's something I want to address with either an isometric exercise or, something else like variable resistance, like where it's a little bit lighter there, but then I can increase, the load. And so I can transition into that a little bit more effectively.
So to that point, I also I would just bench, squat, and deadlift more, but then I would play with how I bench, squat, and deadlift. For example, there would be a day every week that's like working on my grinding strength. This is like, I'm going heavy and I'm challenging my strength on one day. Another day, I'm going very slow and controlled, very slow tempo, controlling the weight.
Perfect form.
And then another day, I'm speed. Another day, I'm going really light and I'm explosive and I'm going speed. And I'm doing that with all three of these lifts. So I'm working on technique.
It's the same movements.
Yes, same movements,
variations.
all barbell, all everything, all the same. But I'm working technique one day and control. Another day, I'm working grinding and power. Another day, I'm working speed, and then incorporating tools like Sal is saying, like chains and bands to mess with the strength curve of those movements. That to me, those things alone will probably improve your bench, squat, and dead than searching for other exercises that have carryover into them.
Totally. A lot of strength when you, not talking about general strength, I'm talking about strength as applied to specific physical pursuits. A lot of it's skill, and skill comes from practicing, consistent and constant practicing of that lift, how to maximize your leverage, how to maximize your control and your power output. And so doing the lifts frequently, even if it's not heavy, is going to make you better. Basically, here it is in a nutshell. Even if you don't get any bigger muscles or your muscles don't contract any harder, so you're not getting any stronger generally, but you just get better at squatting, you're going to squat more weight. I'll use Adam as a great example. Adam is by no means nearly as big as his biggest that he's ever been. He competed for 5 years or 4 years, was on gear for a long time. Big, muscular dude. Arguably can squat now as much as he did back then, if not more, at times during his career. And it's because you're squatting better, not because your muscles are bigger or necessarily stronger. You just got better. So practicing the skill is a big component. Now, that all being said, if you want exercises that tend to benefit those. I'll speak from experience, and I'll start with the squat. For me, one of the things that helped me the most with my back squat, where I noticed a lot of carryover, besides squat variations like box squats and stuff like that, split stance exercises.
Bro, Bulgarian split squats had one of the best carryovers to my squat. When I talk about you talk about the improvement of my squat since competing days and stuff, getting good at Bulgarian split squats and getting strong at them, and then being able to plant both feet on the ground after you got really good at one foot being planted on the ground. Boy, you make
in that respect, like looking at unilateral type of exercises for their benefits in terms of like addressing maybe where there was a bit of an imbalance
or a breakdown.
A breakdown or compensation that may occur is very useful information. And so to be able to incorporate that and then also build more stability around the joint, so that helps to address that a lot of times. So I love like dumbbell bench in terms of bench, like with either both or just one. And really that's because there's that added element, that added variable now where I have to do a lot more stabilizing in terms of where the load is pulling me in a lot more directions.
So I agree so much to do that. If I were to pick my 3 exercises to complement each one of these, it would be all the unilateral stuff. So it would be dumbbell bench press to complement the barbell bench press. It would be a Bulgarian split squat to complement my squat, and it would be a single leg deadlift with dumbbells to complement my deadlift. You get good at barefoot or in flat shoes and deadlifting
on one leg.
One leg off the ground with dumbbells. Watch what the fuck happens when you go back to putting both your feet on the ground and you try and rip that bar up. And to the point, like you're saying, Justin, is it really does address a lot of the discrepancies between one side and the other, which I think that we all have. It's on a spectrum. Some of us have a lot of discrepancy. So if you have a lot of discrepancy, getting really good at all the unilateral work is going to make a huge difference. Even if you have a little bit, it'll still improve.
Yeah, for me, bench, 2 exercises I noticed contributed heavily to my strength of my bench. It was any incline press, just because I neglected those for a long time. So as I got stronger with my incline press, I got way more stable.
Agreed.
On my flat bench. And then the other one was close grip bench presses. At one point, I got really, really good at a close grip bench press. And then going to a regular bench press was just so much stronger. For the squat, lunges, any type of a lunge, whether it's a walking lunge, a back step lunge, or even a Bulgarian split stance squat, just having the torsion on the pelvis where one leg is behind, one leg is in front, you really notice if you have any differences between the right and left-hand side. And I noticed that when I got good at those and I'd go do my squat, I was just more stable. I was way more stable, more secure, and I was able to generate more power. Now for the deadlift, interesting enough, I am noticing a lot of carryover from hip thrusts, believe it or not. Hip thrust is actually giving me some pretty amazing carryover on my deadlift. And partially, I think this is because I never did hip thrusts heavy. Never. I've done them as correctional work, but I've never really trained them consistently with a lot of weight. And what I'm finding with my deadlift is I'm pulling with more strength and power, especially when I start to get to that midpoint of the deadlift from the hip thrust.
It makes the most sense because when you're in a hip thrust, when you're working against gravity, that initial getting the bar up off the ground, I mean, it takes all that glute explosion, right, to get off the ground. Where deadlifting, because there's a lot of leverage involved, you can feel back, you can feel hamstring, and so you putting all that in, and the glute is the strongest part of our lower half, so you putting a lot of focus on getting those glutes to fire at the bottom early, I would imagine it's going to have good carryover in your squat too.
Yes.
You know, I think that's where the real value in that exercise is, the carryover to those big movements. I've never programmed it to where I'm curious. I'm watching you as you're going through it right now, because I know this is probably the most you've ever hip thrusted.
I'm hip thrusting at least once a week, but probably more like twice a week right now. And I'll either use the Nautilus hip drive machine, or I'll do a traditional barbell hip thrust. And I'm really surprised at how strong I'm getting at the hip thrust. I mean, I can put, and not to brag, by the way, I think it's so stupid when people post how much weight they're lifting.
Let's hear your numbers, bro.
Let's hear your hip thrust numbers.
That's so ridiculous to me. It's like, to stop bragging on that. Nobody cares.
Dude, The Rock's like posting that now.
You know why, dude?
No, really?
You know what it is? I'll tell you why. Because I'm experienced this. Because you can get really strong at it, so it looks impressive. That's why it's just like a leg press.
It's like
look
leg
at
press. Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Look at all the weight I can do on the leg press. Nobody cares.
Yeah, nobody gives a shit.
I know a lot of people that can put that much into 2 inches of range of motion. But anyway, I'm definitely noticing a carryover on my deadlift because my deadlift was very back. For me, at least, I'm a very back dominant lifter. I have really, really strong hands. I have a really, really strong back. My lower back, is incredibly strong. And so that's where I get a lot of my strength for the deadlift. But what I'm finding is I'm getting the hip drive now because of the hip thrust. So that's another good one. But here's the other thing you want to keep in mind. If you can identify any type of a mobility or imbalance in yourself, which is very different from person to person. So you may have, here's a big one. This one, actually, I can't even believe I didn't mention this one. This is a big one. Oftentimes, when I would get clients who would come to me who'd want to improve their strength in a lift like the deadlift, you know where the weakest link would be? In the stabilizer muscles of the rotator cuff. And I would have them do rotator cuff exercises, and they'd add like 15 pounds to the bench press. Like in a week or two, just because they're not realizing that their shoulder was so unstable that their body wouldn't let them push anymore.
Right.
Then we would do like basic.
Because they have to compensate around that.
Yeah, and we would do basic.
It's a loss of force.
Yeah, external rotation exercise, and then they'd go bench and like, whoa, 10 more pounds on my bench or whatever. So that's another one. If you have any mobility or issues or imbalances in your body, and you go do mobility work and you work on the range of motion and connecting to them, you'll find that especially if it's individualized, because, I can sit on the podcast and list all the different mobility movements, but it really depends on the individual. Yeah. And if you have a program like Prime Pro, you can actually take the test and find out what area you need to work on. Once you figure that out, work on those, and then you'll see improvements, not just in your bench, squat, and deadlift, but in all the other lifts.
Agreed.